Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why you sometimes feel like you have two different personalities, or why your moods seem to swing wildly from one extreme to another? Well, a fascinating new study called the PACE study is diving deep into this very idea, exploring the messy, dynamic nature of our personalities. Imagine your personality isn't just one steady thing, but more like a system that can have different stable states. This study is all about understanding those shifts, those changes in how we think, feel, and behave from day to day and even hour to hour. So, the core question here is this: are our personalities truly fixed, or are they more like fluid systems that can shift between different modes or attractors? Think of it like a ball rolling on a hilly landscape. It tends to settle into the dips or attractors. But what if our personalities have more than one dip? What if we can switch between these different stable ways of being? That is the big idea the PACE study is exploring. For a long time, personality research focused on traits as stable, fixed characteristics. You are either introverted or extroverted, right? But more recently, scientists have realized that behavior and feelings change a lot throughout the day. This new perspective, called dynamic personality approaches, says that these short-term changes aren't just noise. They're actually a crucial part of what personality is. One of the coolest concepts they use is attractors. Imagine your personality as a system. An attractor is like a stable state, where that system tends to hang out. For example, maybe one attractor for you is highly sociable and outgoing, and another is quiet and focused. The study wants to see if people can actually switch between these different attractors in their daily lives. This is called multistability, and it could totally change how we think about personality. So, how do you even study something this dynamic? The researchers used something called the Experience Sampling Method, or ESM. Basically, they had over 1,900 university students fill out short surveys multiple times a day for weeks on end. This is a huge amount of data, over 130,000 responses in total. The goal was to catch people in their natural environment at different moments to see how their feelings and behaviors fluctuated. Now, a big part of their method involved trying to figure out the best way to sample these daily experiences. They actually experimented with two different ways of sending out surveys. One group got 8 surveys a day for at least 14 days, and another group got 4 surveys a day for at least 28 days. They were comparing which approach was better at capturing these personality shifts, especially for detecting multiple attractors. It is like trying to get a clear picture of a fast-moving object. You need to decide if taking more frequent but shorter snapshots is better, or fewer, longer snapshots. They also had to deal with a common problem in these kinds of studies: missing data. What happens when someone misses a survey, especially if they tend to miss them at certain times or in certain moods? The study tried a clever trick. They asked participants to retrospectively recall what they were feeling or doing during a missed survey. This helps them understand if the missing data is random or if it is connected to specific states, which could skew the results. It is like trying to fill in the blanks in a story, but doing it in a way that accounts for why some pages might be missing. Beyond just observing the shifts, the study wanted to understand why these changes happen. They looked at situational factors: where you are, who you are with. But they also introduced a neat personalization aspect. Instead of just asking who were you with, they let participants add specific names for people they interact with regularly. This makes the data much richer. Imagine the difference between knowing someone was with a friend versus knowing they were with Anna, my best friend from childhood. That level of detail can really help explain why states change. They also considered internal factors like hunger or tiredness and external events. The big takeaway here is that our states are influenced by a complex interplay of where we are, who we are with, and how we're feeling internally. It is not just one thing, but a whole system working together. And this is where the idea of attractors really shines. Different combinations of these influences might push you towards one attractor, like being highly engaged in a task, or another, like feeling overwhelmed and wanting to disengage. Now, here is another really interesting part. ESM studies with all those daily surveys are incredibly informative, but also a lot of work. So, the researchers developed a new questionnaire called the Personality Dynamics Inventory, or PERDI. The idea is to see if they can measure these dynamic personality patterns, like the number of attractors someone might have just by asking them a few questions once. It is like trying to get a snapshot of someone's entire photo album by looking at just a few key pictures. They had participants estimate the percentage of times they'd rate themselves on a certain trait, like sociability, on a scale. Then they could even adjust those estimations to reflect their own self-concept of having multiple typical ways of being. This is a really innovative way to try and capture personality dynamics without requiring weeks of daily surveys. The big question is, how well does this single session Purdy measure align with the detailed week-long ESM data? They're comparing the results directly to see if it's a good shortcut, or if the detailed ESM data is still essential. This study is pretty massive. They collected data from 1,908 undergraduate students across Canada, Germany, and the United States. That is a diverse group, and collecting data from multiple sites helps make the findings more generalizable. They ended up with over 130,000 observations. They really focused on trying to get enough data per person to make these complex specific analyses possible. The participants were university students, and they were compensated with course credits and other incentives. What is interesting is how the compensation structure seems to have influenced completion rates, with German universities showing higher completion rates, possibly due to how credits are awarded there. This highlights a practical challenge in large-scale research. Looking at the sample, it is mostly young adults identifying as women, and a significant portion are psychology majors, especially at the German universities. They also collected demographic and ethnicity data, showing a relatively diverse sample in North America. This graph shows how many surveys each person completed. As you can see, there is a lot of variation. Some people completed almost all of them, while others dropped off. This is typical in ESM studies, and they've built in methods to handle this missing data. So, what is the big picture here? The PACE study is laying the groundwork for a much deeper understanding of personality dynamics. It is about moving beyond static traits to see how we actually function moment to moment. The implications are huge. If we can truly understand these dynamic patterns, we might be able to develop new ways to help people change or manage their personalities. For instance, instead of trying to make an introvert more extroverted, we might help them navigate situations where they need to be more outgoing more effectively, or help them transition more smoothly back to their preferred introverted state. Think about therapy. If personality isn't just one fixed set of tendencies, but a system with multiple attractors, interventions could focus on strengthening desirable attractors or helping people transition between them. It could also explain why people with similar personalities react so differently to the same life events. Of course, no study is perfect. The researchers acknowledge that this study can't pinpoint the single optimal ESM design because what works best might depend on the person and the specific personality trait being studied. They also point out that while personalizing situational cues is great, ideally we'd have even more sophisticated ways to measure situations. Perhaps by integrating mobile phone data or even asking interaction partners themselves about their state. And, of course, the sample being primarily undergraduates might limit how broadly we can apply these findings to older adults or different life stages. Overall, the PACE study is a monumental effort to capture the dynamic, ever-changing nature of personality. By combining a large sample, innovative ESM designs, clever ways to handle missing data, and a new cross-sectional measure, they're paving the way for a more nuanced and realistic understanding of who we are. This research reminds us that personality isn't just a label, it is a living, breathing process. It is amazing to see how collaborations across institutions and the use of open source tools can make such ambitious research possible. The study highlights the importance of thinking about the how, the design, and measurement when trying to understand complex psychological phenomena. The detailed references section shows the depth of the research that informed the study and the many avenues it opens up for future work. Imagine future studies exploring how these attractors might change over the lifespan or how they are influenced by major life events like getting married or starting a new career. So, what is my take on this? I think this is a fantastic step forward in personality science. The concept of attractors and multistability is really powerful for explaining why people can seem so different from one moment to the next, even if their overall trait scores are similar. The Purdy questionnaire is a particularly exciting development because it makes this complex idea much more accessible for research and potentially even for self-understanding. We can't stop our personalities from being dynamic, but understanding these dynamics, like the PACE study aims to do, gives us more power to navigate our own inner worlds and the worlds of others. It moves us closer to seeing personality not as a fixed blueprint, but as a dynamic, ever-evolving story. If you found this as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button, leave a comment below with your thoughts on personality attractors, and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more dives into the human psyche. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.